Okay, good morning, Harris County. It's 10 a.m. It is a Thursday, and it is time for the Homegrown Lecture Series. I want to welcome you here today. If you are a returning attendee, welcome. If this is your first time attending one of our homegrown lectures, we want to welcome you also. We're always glad the door is open and new folks are coming in. We are coming to you from high atop the 10th floor off of Highway 290. We are in the office today. So I want to welcome you. As you can see, our agenda is up for the next quarter for July, August, and September. So on the 1st, I will be giving an update on the latest and greatest in bedding plants. I am traveling out to California next week for the trials to see what's new. So that will be hot off the presses. On the 15th, we will have garden hummingbird safety. Uh, on the August 5th, we'll be cooking safely outdoors. August 19th, fall vegetable gardening. Everybody will be getting ready for that. September 2nd, we'll be enhancing your dishes with flavored butters. And on September 16th, to close out the quarter, we'll be growing microgreens at the windowsill. So without any further ado, our speaker today is Brandi Keller. She will be speaking on art from the garden. And Brandi is now our second or our other horticulture agent here in Harris County. So I want to congratulate her on that. That promotion was very well deserved. So with that, Brandi, it is all yours. Take it away.
All right, thank you. Well, Paul, do you want to let me forward this. Do you want to mention the Homegrown podcast
I
now that we have a podcast?
I will certainly do that. As you can see, we do have a podcast. So, you know, if you have attended any of our lectures, you know we have these lectures twice a month now. We have a newsletter that goes out monthly that you should be receiving, and now we've added a podcast. We've added another branch to the homegrown tree, I guess. And then this first podcast is really just the three agents, myself, Brandi, and Shannon, just giving a little bit of our background for you all to get to know us. So you can either use the link there, the bit.ly link, which is shorter, or if you have your phone, you can use the QR code and that will take you there also. But give it a listen. We are planning on having new episodes monthly, so stay tuned and we will have some new information for you in the podcast format.
All right, thank you, Paul. Yeah, and if you receive the newsletter, we'll be sure to put the link in there if you'd like to take a listen to that. So as Paul said, I'm Brandi Keller, the new second county extension horticulture agent. And today I'm going to be talking about art from the garden. I know everyone, they learn differently. And so this is just trying to bring about a different language to explore our gardens and how we grow fruits, vegetables, flowers, our landscape plants. And this is just a creative way to to change that language up. As far as my background, I do have a little bit of an art background. With my undergraduate, I had minors in writing and in studio art. I mainly worked in oil painting, but I really took a love to printmaking and other things. So I'm sure I'm like a lot of people who may be listening. Sometimes I just make something with what I have on hand. So we're going to talk about that. What we'll cover today, why art from the garden. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on dyes, monoprints, and drying, and then we'll just add a few other things at the end. So first of all, why art? Well, really, in short, for wellness, really, and self-expression. A lot of times, materials that you may have on hand, you have grown yourself, or that you've received from somebody. So there's that natural connection. And then, of course, when we add memories into it, I mean, one of the most important things in our lives are memories. So how do we take an experience that we have lived with someone or something that we've gone through ourselves, and how do we connect that to something that we can create, and then we can have something tangible from that? So I think that's probably one of the sweeter aspects. It's kind of like a living record of ourselves. And then the other side of it is, if you're exposed to a different variety of uses for plants, that could impact what you choose to grow. You could utilize what you have now, or you may purposely grow something that we talk about to use it in another manner. So first, we're going to explore dyes. So natural dyes really go back, I mean, really at least 4,000 years, Middle East, Egypt. So there's a long, long history. Synthetic dyes in comparison are relatively, it's been a short life. But when they came about in the mid 19th century, they were it turned out they were cheaper to make, they were easier to dye with, and they lasted longer. So we could really pump out more dyed material quicker and cheaper. So they kind of took over. But there really is a trend going back to natural resources. And when you do that, there's more variability. You know, if you have anything different in that pot that you're creating that dye in, it can change that coloring and the texture. So really what that means is that you're creating something that's more unique. So dyes really can come from plants, and I'm talking the whole plant: leaves, flowers, stems, even the roots, berries, nuts. But dyes can also come from insects or minerals. And because these items have their own pigments, those pigments can basically be extracted and used for dyes. And this particular picture, I just thought it was really, we're going to talk a little bit more about onion skins, but just a beauty on its own. So here's kind of like a color wheel in the shape of a line of natural dyes. We have, what you can see: spinach, red cabbage. I'm going to ask the audience, I have a mystery on my hands. I cannot figure out what that very first blue is. It kind of looks like a dried leaf, like a tea or flower petal. I've looked it up, so if you guys have any ideas, let me know. Go ahead and post those. But you can see the pomegranate right there kind of does a, like a kind of a grayish. And all the way on the right, those are coffee beans. So you're not going to be growing those in your garden, but you can easily grow turmeric. Maybe not easily, but it can be done. So this particular picture has a wide range of colors. Let's see, the very next one, this is more of a close-up. And I wanted to point out, you see that green in the middle? So basically they mix the red cabbage with the turmeric to make green. So I'm going to ask, can anyone note a detail of the coloring that you see here that's curious? What stands out? I'm going to see if you guys can. So if you look at the coloring and look at the food that it comes from, what seems different or curious? So with the other picture, someone says hibiscus. Not sure. All right. So look at the color and the plant that it comes from. What is a little off with this photo? I'm waiting to see it. Let's look at all the colors. So this blue one with the red cabbage, I don't see anyone said it yet. So the red cabbage turns blue. Isn't that kind of odd? So they do. Red cabbage creates a blue dye, and that comes from the pigments. They're called anthocyanins. Those can also be found in like blueberries, blackberries. They have antioxidant effects, but essentially, and it doesn't happen in every food, but with red cabbage, it does. It will change the color. Now, if you add something with more pH, it can bring it back to the purple color. So that's why, yep, Alexa said red cabbage. That's why some people cook red cabbage with apples. It just changes the pH enough that it preserves that cooked cabbage with purple. But with dyes, it's blue. Really cool. So this particular example is with eggs, and I just thought this graphic summed up things really nicely. So what they're using is chicken stock, onion skin. I had chicken stock on the mind because of my story. I don't know if you guys save your onion skins, but I particularly do because I love to make chicken stock. I call it my liquid gold. And when you use those onion skins, it can just really create that richness to that stock color. And that's essentially what they're using here. But if you see the difference between the light egg and the dark egg, the light egg, they had placed already hard-boiled eggs in the broth that was prepared for 10 minutes. But the dark egg, they actually boiled and cooked the eggs in that dyed broth for those 10 minutes. So the longer something stays in there, the darker it can be. And I don't know if you're familiar with what you see on the right, but you can take small plants and cover it and close it like in a mesh or pantyhose. And where that plant is coming in direct contact with that egg, that dye will not be able to access. So then you get this beautiful thing. Whoever created this, I mean, they must just be walking around still proud. Look how beautiful it is. So they just secured a flower onto the egg, and the dye colored the egg around it. So this is a really super general process. When you go online, there's a lot of different ways you can do this. So we're just going to talk in general. You can use leaves, flowers. We are going to focus more on the plants today and not minerals and insects. But if you take leaves, flowers, even moss or lichen, an optional part is you can break it down in the food processor. It will create more surface area. In this picture, they just sliced beets pretty wide. You boil that in water to extract the pigment. And before you actually soak the fabric in it, you want to prepare the fabric in order to absorb those colors properly. And what I mean by that is in dyeing with especially with cloth, not necessarily paper, it's called mordant. It's MORDANT. And if you have your cloth prepared already with this mordant, it will help retain that dye. There are different recipes for mordants, but one is using alum and baking soda. So you would put that prepared cloth in with the liquid, soak it, be sure you dry it, and then wash. In the wash, it may lighten up a little bit. The other couple points I'll make is you see there's a stainless steel pan. You do want to use a non-reactive pan. And when it comes to cloth, silk it's just a lot easier to start with. It'll absorb it. So if you're starting out, you may want to invest in a little silk compared to cotton. So this is a really great resource that the University of Florida, Paul or someone can put in. So basically they have an instruction with how to dye fabric using coreopsis flowers. So obviously the left is, and I forget which coreopsis this is, but in the top right, that's the first photo. So basically, I think they were prepping those flowers, letting it soak for 24 hours, and then the next day is when they boiled it to extract all the yellow color out of it. The middle photo shows that they've strained the flowers with a, what is that called? A coffee filter. And then, of course, it yielded this beautiful yellow dye. They soaked strips in, and in this case, they only soaked it for about 10 minutes. And you can see what resulted on the right. And I think one of the other things they said in this particular experiment, they didn't use any mordant on that. But this link is really cool. If you go to the bottom of this instruction, they have other links with talking about growing plants for dyeing. So out in the garden, if you would like to grow plants for dyes, not all plants have pigments that are suitable for dyes. They may not dissolve in the water, they may fade really quickly. And really most plants that do work, you're going to notice that the tones are a lot more subtle than synthetic dyes. So there's probably a few more colors than this, but I just put up there what would fit on the screen. One thing I learned was prickly pear fruit. I would never have thought to use that. It creates a peach color. You can see Spanish moss creates a tan. And the other thing I wasn't aware too was the wax myrtle leaves for yellow. And then the other yellow that creates a really nice yellow is chamomile, the Roman chamomile. When you do grow flowers for creating dyes, you'll realize that you're going to need more flowers than you thought. But you want to be sure you don't want to harvest too much of the plant, especially at the beginning of the season. Once it gets to the end of the season, feel free to harvest, most of it, unless you wanted to save some for seeds. All right. Do we have any questions about dyes? Any pressing questions? It's a very wide topic. These are just kind of overviews with everything right now.
Brandi, no questions. There were a couple comments about, that one that you had the question on.
Red
and
cabbage?
some folks, well, your first question about what
the hibiscus.
The hibiscus or the sorrel may have been
Sorrel, yeah.
one of the options. So
yeah, I'll have to.
And then someone had dried chilies. So I don't know if maybe that, the hot peppers dried, but that's it on this end. So you can carry on.
Yeah, good suggestions. See, that's my way of making sure that you're paying attention. All right, going to monoprints. It was really hard to keep that section that small. It was really cool, and there's a lot to go over. But the next section is monoprints. Monoprints are a type of printmaking that just produces one kind of image, and it's not any, there are a couple different ways to make monoprints, but in general, there's a really wide variety. Essentially, if you create something and that's the only one that is exactly like that, you have created a monoprint. So this lady's pretty cool. Her name is Anna Atkins. She had a friend that discovered this process of cyanotype, Sir John Herschel. He discovered this in 1842, but Anna started using it for botanical purposes. And she probably had at least 20 years to play around with this. And she is viewed as the first female photographer. And we are using photography. Cyanotype is a type. They're categorizing that under photography. And she is also believed to be the first person to have ever created a photo book. And the photo book was a book of cyanotypes on British algae. So I thought that was one of the little facts that you can find with women that we've never heard their names of before. Anna Atkins. So this cyanotype, it is a blueprinting. Basically use a paper that's been treated with light sensitive chemicals, and that's usually like an iron salt solution, and essentially you place the object on, it's exposed to sunlight, and with that sunlight, the UV rays is what interacts with that chemical. The other name is sun printing. So I'm going to ask another question and I'll let you answer as I discuss a little bit more about this. But does anyone know what this particular color of blue is called? If you have some experience with art, you may know. I mean, well, anyone may, but especially with painting. So with this process, it really does rely on that negative space to define the positive space. So it's kind of creating an outline of it. You can buy paper that, and I think especially with kids, they sell it. It's just called sun printing or sun paper. So you can buy it already. Already sensitized, or you can buy a substance. There's a couple steps to it. I did it once a long time ago, and then you can paint it onto paper, but you can also use that on fabric also. And so when you lay the material down, the paper that you can see will turn from blue to white the longer that it is exposed. But then when you rinse it with water and you dry it, it's the opposite. Then the background turns blue and the shadow of the object stays white. And I would argue with anyone that I think the fern is probably the best thing. It is the best item that you could possibly use a cyanotype with. All right, I'm going to look. Nope. Cobalt, nope, close. Okay, it is Prussian blue. That is the name for this particular dark blue. But we're going to look a little bit just at each of these real quickly before we move on. The orange, you can see the center, the rind is going to be white, but that inside, the sunlight was able to capture it. But I really love this geranium for this particular talk because you know how thick those geranium leaves are, and that is white as can be. It blocked out all the sun. It did not react at all. But look how beautiful that lighter tone of blue is with the flowers. And then even when you go down to the buds, there's a little bit of bright white and then a lighter blue. And then of course this dandelion on the right, I don't know, it might be challenging that fern for the best for the best. Here we go. Okay, another type of monoprint. If you are familiar with printing at all, you may be more familiar with the word lino cut, and basically that's a piece of rubbery, not really rubber, flat material that you can carve into, or wood cuts, you cut into the wood, or intaglio uses chemicals to etch into metal. But these monotypes, you do not etch, you don't cut into the medium at all. It's you're just altering that surface with paints and texture. And a lot of times this is used with a piece of glass. And I'll show you a little, it might be a little bit hard to understand that. But you don't need a printing press, and it's more accessible for beginners. A really basic level would be when kids, dip their, kind of paint on the back of a leaf and press it. But the leaf on the left, I'm going to talk about, do you think this is a good leaf to print with? And I just have to answer quickly. Yes, it is. Mainly because you can see the veins. There's enough of the veins that it's going to represent on the paper, but it's not like a real big, thick vein, kind of like like rhubarb. There's too much. You're going to have a lot of white space around it, or even kale. That stem, you would have to cut the stem down to use that. The other thing is you would want to use the underside of the leaf, not the top, because of those veins. The photo on the right is a monoprint I did. It was quite a long time ago, and I think that this was wet on wet. So there was ink rolled out onto a piece of glass, and then there was it was a couple step process, and then ink on the back, and then you lay it down. I do have a video because I think it's really hard to imagine. So with this is just an example. If you give a kid, a paintbrush and paint, they're going to glob it on. That's way too much for a proper monoprint. Now you can take that sponge that you see right here, and just you need a lot less paint than you think. So you need a lot more flowers to create dye. You need a lot less paint to create a good monoprint. Let's see. So this is a little example. These are all examples. So number one, the bottom left is a brayer. You're going to need that. This is going to be able to, it's kind of like, when you're painting your walls, just a lot smaller. It's going to even out the paint on that small roller, but it's also going to, it's going to thin it out so you don't have too much. So that top picture with the black, what I see there is when you're getting ready to prepare, you may roll it out to get a lot of the ink off, or at the end. So those are examples of the rolls. Totally non-related, but it does go back to printing. This Gyo, I know how to say this, Gyo Taku. You may have seen this and not known what you were looking at. Basically, they make a fish and everything. They roll out ink on a fish, and either on paper or canvas or fabric, they create a monoprint from a fish. And then the top right picture, you're seeing the paper lifting up from an etched. So, all right, there's so many different ways you can do this. So I'm hoping this is not using the glass, but this is a very easy way to create a really, I need to figure out how to, okay, I'm going to go back to this. All right. And I'm going to forward this video. It's way too long. And I'm also going to turn it down. So if you have some really nice big leaves, like she's showing here, that don't have too thick of a vein, this could be your very first step into monoprinting. So she's showing you the leaves there, but then she right here, and you can see this all right, Paul?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, so she's going to show the process, but you can see how it picked up all those veins. Sometimes when you do a second printing of a, I'm going to go back for a second. Sometimes when you have a little bit too much paint on the first one, you can create a ghost print on the second one, but this one works though. But you can try to do a second printing, and I don't think that's necessarily what she did here, but look how all that ink picked up in the veins. And I think this is also a really good opportunity to explore botany and venation on leaves. And then I'm going to forward again to the process. So you could see here she's rolling out that brayer, and this is just printmaking definitely 101, and smoothing out, evening, and just going over, not putting too much on it. But you can see that leaf was already dark to start with, so she already had a little bit of ink on there. And be sure to get that stem. You always want to include the stem because it adds a lot to that, to the final image. And so you can see she set that down on a piece of paper. And this is unlike when you do these with kids, how you just take the leaf and you just smash it down. It's a little bit reversed. And with leaves, I know I'm spending a little bit more time on this, but with leaves, if you do this with your fingers, you're going to be able to feel the outline and all the veins. You're generally going to have some samples that you just missed, and you're going to fix it the next time. So we'll see this, and then we'll move on. And then she peels that up. And this is, like I said, this is going above and beyond just, the crafting version. Beautiful. All right, so I am going to go on to the next. Any questions on monoprinting? It's a big topic, actually.
I had two questions for you real quick, Brandi. One was, and this is going back to the dye, is can you dye without doing the mordant?
You can, but it depends on the material. Number one, it depends what plant or fruit or flower that comes from. Sometimes it just will not really absorb into that material, and then it may fade even quicker.
Okay. And then the other question was on the section that you just covered was, can you use UV light like the one for resin? So I'm not sure what that means, but can you use UV light?
I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure what that's referring to. So I don't think I can answer that.
Okay. Okay. Not a problem.
All right. Let me get the presentation back. Oh, okay, here we go. Yeah, I'm not really sure, but if you want to give me a, send an email, we can talk, or I'm sure right after this, I'm going to be looking it up. All right, so drying and pressing. Again, this is a huge topic. I'm mainly going to focus on pressing. So why dry or press? Well, it really creates a longer lasting beauty from beauty that you already had in your garden. It enables you to bring in the outdoors. It's usually inexpensive because you already have something growing or you've planted it to grow. And it utilizes, it utilizes what you already have. So the history of drying also goes back centuries, flowers and leaves. Really, it goes, I think the earliest I saw was in Egypt. Egypt kept coming up a lot. And then I discovered, this was something I learned, that the British Museum actually houses a dried laurel wreath, head wreath, that was found in Egypt 2,000 years ago. So, even though plants and flowers, they have their season, they come and go, they live and die, by preserving them, I mean, they can be preserved for a very long time. This particular technique, Oshibana, is a Japanese practice of pressing flowers and creating an image. That goes back to the 16th century. This particular image was one that I can find that I could use, but you know, with Oshibana, really they like to create images like scenes of mountains, you know, out of flowers. So much more intricate. Then we'll go a little bit more into history with herbariums. So these are collections of plants used for scientific study. So although it's still done, I'm pretty sure we still keep, especially at universities and botanical gardens, herbariums. But just think what photography has done to this. You can get, you can preserve the plant in its prime with no risk of fading colors with photography alone. But I think you can see now, if you're on Etsy, if you go online, a lot of the artwork that we see really goes back to these scientific specimens. And it's like they're creating pieces of artwork from this same process. On the right, you can see when you are pressing, and especially this can be used at home too. But you know, when you're pressing specimens, a lot of times they want it in the reproductive stage. So you have the flower, the bud, then the seed pod. But these little pieces of tape, which you may have not noticed quite so much on the left side on the real specimen, that keeps them in place. So when they are drying in the exact position that you want them to dry in. On a local level, Mercer Botanic Gardens has an herbarium, and they actually have around 52,000 plant specimens in theirs. So that's what we have locally. If you're not in the area, you can check out your botanical gardens. Some of the things that we're not going to cover today, I mean, we're focusing on flowers and plants, you know, or the leaves, but there's drying methods, the fruit, even corn. You know, this is, you know, these beautiful decorative pieces of corn. You know, they're used for artwork, and then showing these gourds in just a really simplistic setting, set against glass in the sunlight. That only touches the tip of the iceberg when it comes to gourds. So there's a lot of things that you can use. We're just not going to spend so much time on those. So preserving the flowers and leaves, really, it's air drying, pressing. You're going to use desiccants, and they can be used inside the microwave or outside the microwave. The advantage with desiccants is with the pressing, you're creating a very, very flat piece. When you put it in these little, this silica, you can preserve it not flat. It can be three-dimensional in its shape, even with the microwave as you see with these little violas. But we're going to look at some pressed flowers. So what can be dried this way? Flowers, stems, leaves. Obviously, you don't want something too thick, but that does not mean that you cannot dry something thicker. There's probably going to be experimentation with it, and then you would want to supply more paper in order for that moisture to absorb, because there's going to be that water content in there. And you want to pick at the peak. Sometimes, you know, we just go out to the garden, oh, this is going to, you know, getting ready to go. Well, it's going to preserve better if you pick it when it looks best. So you may have some of these flowers already in your garden, or you may want to try to grow some to press them. Flat petals do work better. Single petals, we did talk about if they were a little bit thicker. And the retention for the yellows are really good. Red, it's kind of fair. They do tend to turn brown. If you've ever had a red rose and it started dying, the first thing it does is it turns brown. But there are ways to preserve a little bit of that red color. And then if it's a really light color, they will fade. And one thing I'll mention too, if it's too thin, I tried moonflowers in the past and they're just too papery thin. Hibiscus, it doesn't mean it can't be done. It just takes a bit more practice. And with this, it's not just the end product, it is the experimentation, the trial and error. Growing just plants to dry. You have the examples on the right. These dry really well, and if you've ever touched a straw flower, I mean, a straw flower already feels dry, and it's still alive. I think they're pretty comical. And then seed heads. Poppy's probably my favorite, but then whatever seed pod I pick up, I'll say that's my favorite too. I don't see money plant around here as much, but that's one that goes back to my memories with my mom. So again, it touches back with our memories. And Paul, I think he put in the link for Mississippi or Missouri. Oh, that was Missouri. Mississippi State, there's another one, another link he'll put in. This is one of the graphics from it. And this shows all the necessary components. So you have the wood, the paper. You can easily buy these. Years ago, I was pressing way too large a leaves, so I had to have my husband build me one. And it looked almost exactly like this. So you have the wood on the outside, you have the paper that the flowers are sitting on, you have the paper that's going to go on top of the flowers. Who can tell me what those brown pieces are representing? So the brown pieces are between the paper and the wood. Do you know what those are? Any takers? So you have wood, you have paper, and then you have something between, and that paper should really be like an acid-free paper. Any guesses? Cork? That probably wouldn't be you could probably use it. All right, I'm going to tell you it's cardboard. And the reason I said you might be able to use cork is because really you need some material to absorb that moisture. What I see there are probably like geraniums and pansies. They're not going to give off that much moisture. But if you go with anything bigger, bigger leaves, you need something to absorb. And you don't want, the wood isn't going to do it as easily. And one of our last slide, this is going back to using these specimens in a decorative manner. You can dry a piece, add the Latin name, and it really adds that personal element to your specimens. And then you're kind of transitioning from botanical purposes to a creative element, and then you can add notes. So even our own handwriting added with this can serve as a piece of artwork. And then to the right, I just want to emphasize repetition. Repetition in art is usually an important factor. So you can take one leaf and it looks really cool, but you put 30 leaves together and it creates more of an impact. Edible art. Okay, so we were talking about art other than what you can eat, and then I put edible art in. Well, because I broke the rules. No, there's just some. There's some there's some ways that you can use things from your garden, and it literally is a little piece of artwork. This left photo came from Sunset Magazine, and they used it with butter. They didn't necessarily do rolls of butter like Shannon's going to talk about in a few weeks. They smeared it onto a piece of slate and, you know, softened it, and then they added their edible flowers, herbs, probably some peppers in there. And the one on the right, I'm going to have links to these on, I already created a PDF. So if you do the survey afterwards, next Friday, I'll send these out. But this recipe is in there too. The one on the right, she actually used cream cheese. So you're literally just going out, picking things from your garden, throwing them on top of cream cheese or butter, and it looks like a piece of art. I just love it. This one I did just this week. I finally did the focaccia garden art. There's so many things you can do with this, and I'm sure that you've seen it around. It's a hot little project right now. And what I did was I set out a piece of wax paper, and I arranged some of these flowers, which are, you know, just slices of pepper, tomatoes. And if you look on the right, one of the things I learned was those peppers need to be thicker. You don't want them too thick. You don't want them to be raw when the bread is cooked, but you want them to be thick enough that, you know, they just don't kind of dwindle. But that was really fun. And you can use all sorts of things, you know, from your garden, even like rosemary, thyme, really bringing in the herbs into this one. Or you can just simply cut a fruit, and it is a piece of art in and of itself. The left picture, that's my dorky humor, you know, figure one, figure two, but it's, you know, fig, fig dot, fig one, fig two. Okay, I'm just going to continue laughing in my office about that one. We'll go on. Oh gosh, so funny.
What was that reference to?
What was that?
What was that reference to?
I'll talk about it afterwards.
I'm just kidding.
Oh goodness. So these are some of the things well, not all of them. This one I've created. So you can also work plants into ceramics. This was a really large elephant ear that I made out of porcelain. Of course, I had all the tools to be able to do it, a slab roller and a kiln and beautiful glazes, but this can even be done with air dried clay or some other clays that you can buy from the craft store. But the one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to put like the leaf down on to the clay and then, you know, mash it with your fingers. It's going to be very uneven. I would use like a rolling pin to do a little bit more even of a layer, but you can go into ceramics. There's pounding, so you can actually take the flowers and leaves and pound them onto cloth or paper. One of the things I liked about this particular example is it gave me an idea just how they're little swatches. You could probably make like a little art book based off of plants that you've grown in your garden. But this takes a little bit more time and effort. Basically, you're just pounding that pigment from the plant into that material, which is generally cloth or paper. It's a little bit hard for consistency, so it takes a bit more practice. And then you'd want to tape them down, just like with pressing maybe. Up north, Japanese maples by far are probably the best leaf I've ever seen pounded. Wreaths. So this is one I did. All these materials I found. with the exception, I may have bought the bittersweet, but other than that, you can create, there's a lot of materials down here, especially like with the magnolia, they naturally shed, and you can create beautiful wreaths out of those, either not with the ugly green side when it dries, but the back side when it's all kind of fuzzy tan, or I've seen people spray paint the leaves and then create the wreaths. And one last thing, when you're at home, you're just kind of looking for inspiration. And I made envelopes out of banana leaves. And for me, what I did, this was a project I did it for all the people that had passed in my life. And I just create, so it's very ephemeral. It's not something that's going to stay around. You create it, you document it with photos, and then you let it go, just like you let, the people go in your lives. But there's so many things that you can do with what's in our backyard. And then of course I just created the butterfly with all the extra materials from the envelopes. So we're going to have a short quiz. I'm going to be looking at your answers. What is the topic of my next talk? Anybody remember?
So they had to pay attention to that very first slide,
Yep.
which was 51 minutes ago.
51 minutes ago. It wasn't that long. Oh, went to the next one. Okay, anybody? Okay, it is, I got to remember the title now. Garden hummingbird safety. So it's talking about hummingbirds, but also, how to do that safely for the hummingbirds. All right, natural dyes go back at least how far? Who can answer? Any answers? Natural dyes go back how far? How many years? $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. Shannon got it. Who is known as the first female photographer? What was her name? There's a alliteration there. Julian said centuries. What is her name? Yep, I see you guys all getting the 4,000. Who is the first photographer? Anybody?
Yeah, I think there's a little delay with the answers coming in.
Oh, okay. Okay, I won't say it.
Here comes one.
Here comes one. Let's see, Anna Atkins. That is correct. Yes. What is the best drying method for roses? This is a trick question because I didn't tell you this. I want to see, go ahead and put in your answers, and I'll go on to the next question. What do you think the best drying method is for roses? And then the last question. Red cabbage creates what color of dye? I'm going to let you answer those. I'm going to come back. I'm going to look. And then what I'm going to, oh, and what do you want to try? Yeah, go ahead and put that in too. If one of these particularly stood out to you that you would like to try, your hands up. This is all about experimentation. Let me tell you, the first try is never going to work. And so it's just the fun of, I remember doing ceramics. You would spend all the time on this piece, glazing it, firing it, and then through the second firing, and it could have cracked. It's a little heartbreak, but you get over it. All right, blue. Yes. Yes, desiccant. Somebody said desiccant probably for the roses. That's probably what I would do too. May be able to air dry. It depends on the color. There's going to be discoloration there. But I think if you want to preserve the color the best that you can, it would be with the silica drills. Um, Not drills. What are they called? Pellets. There you go. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to keep looking at your answers, but the key elements, you can grow plants for more than just food. And you can use more of the plant. It's just not, the leaves of lettuce or the fruit like a tomato. Consider the form, weight, and texture of your plants that you're using, and then how that's going to affect your art. Experimentation, playful. Yeah, that playfulness is probably so good for wellness. It helps us release stress, create memories, and have fun. So let me look at these. Printing on my dyed fabric, dried flowers, yeah, and the butter. Aren't we all going to be doing that though? We're going to be wishing it was pansy season, and it's probably past prime of nasturtiums too. All right. And these are the resources and links. I do have more available. I did another, if you did the basil talk, we sent out a one-page PDF, and I'll have that available. I will send that out next week. We just ask that you do the survey. I know it's every time, but it provides us with so much great feedback and information. And for us to be able to do this online and not just in person, it helps us keep that going. Any other questions, Paul?
Yes, I have one question and then I have a clarification. So the clarification on the UV light, someone posted, so for the cyanotypes, you can use UV light. Because basically, as someone else mentioned, you were talking about the sunlight printing.
So
if you don't have, if you don't have sunlight, you would use UV lights. So that should work.
Yeah, I was thinking we were past that section, so I didn't even think of that. But yeah, I haven't tried it, but yeah.
And then the other question is, when I guess the lady was making the prints, the back of the leaf with the paint and things like that. The question is, will any paint work or not? Are there certain paints maybe that you should stay away from?
When I worked with it, I used special printmaking, but I think what she just probably used acrylic. You can easily use acrylic.
Okay.
Definitely.
Here's an interesting one. Do you need, when you were talking about the pounding and on the cloth, do you need to mortar that cloth when pounding on the fabric?
I never found anything that referenced that, and it's probably because when you're extracting those pigments through the water and you're dyeing cloth that way, it's more unstable than if you're pounding them directly in. It is a good question. Like I said, I didn't see anything because I did ask that quickly of myself. I didn't see anything referencing it, but that may be something that I'll look up a little bit later.
Okay. Here's another one that came in. Have you ever used cat litter to dry plants?
I have not, no. And I probably wouldn't, just because I started getting away from the clay anyway. But I think you probably could, though.
Okay. And then
experimenting.
There you go. And then Michelle posted, it is what you use for gel nails drying or UV resin. So I don't know if that's referring back to one of the other comments.
She's talking about the UV light.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't know. That's going to be a mystery after we leave here. I know later in the day we'll all probably be Googling out of curiosity. But Paul, don't you know when you go get your manicure and you're done getting your fingernails painted, don't you remember that they set you underneath the UV light to dry them?
Well, I only get pedicures, and I usually do that after I get my hair cut, you know, the long locks that I have.
Yeah.
So
Well, then if you get your pedicures, you would know that after you get your toenails painted, they have feet UV lights too. You've forgotten that part of your
I guess
pedicure.
it's been a while since I've been there.
All right. Well, if you don't have any other questions, I mean, this was definitely fun. This tapped into, you know, it allowed me to combine a bunch of my interests and backgrounds. So, and you know, if you'd like one particular topic on this, the other thing too is if you know, if you have a group that you would like this presentation given to, I mean, I can do that, or I can actually expand on each section, or one section, not each of them. That would be like a half-day thing. So like going into dyes, you know, things like that. So, you know, keep that in mind. So thank you. This was fun. I hope you enjoyed it. Please fill out the survey. Please fill out feedback and suggestions. I look forward to your suggestions. And keep your creative juices flowing. Hopefully this is giving you some good ideas to go fly off with. And I'll see you back next month for hummingbirds. All right.